I'd like to welcome you to the place. This is a place for intellectual, spiritual, and scriptural honesty. We do apologize for the delay. Our sound system here in the studio went completely down, and so we've had to put in another type of monitoring system that would satisfy us on stage and also our audience. With that said, I want to get into the show and talk about the New Covenant Group. What is it? So many people are asking questions. They will say, Dr. Jones, Rhonda, what is the New Covenant Group? And so tonight, this is not a discussion about what I think it is. This is a discussion about what you think it is, because we have atheists and theists alike coming our way, and this is a movement of people who are willing to work together in a sense, and I don't mean to be answering the question, but I just want to get basically how people feel about the New Covenant Group. What do you think, honey?
Well, I think it's a good way to take the pulse of people, to ask a question and try to get an honest and thoughtful answer. And if we hear what they think it is and it's not jiving with the way we want to represent it, then we can make adjustments. So I think it's good to always take the pulse of people by asking.
Bob, welcome to the show. This is Professor Bob Graves. He's a wonderful linguist, and I want you to appreciate everything that he has to offer here at the New Covenant Group. He has a show called The Unconventional Pastor, and it's an awesome show. If you want to get a good education on linguistics, also different perspectives of the Bible, and just philosophy in general, you need to watch that show. Welcome, Bob.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. And it's great to be a part of the New Covenant Group. I've been involved with you folks since August of last year, and it's been a very delightful opportunity to be involved in the various things we've been doing. It's great to be here.
Well, thank you. We also have Daryl Furlow from East Texas with us on Skype, via Skype. Welcome, Daryl.
Thank you. I'll say along with Bob, it's good to be here. I'm looking forward to an evening of much to say, much to hear. Good things.
Okay. We also have Michael Fulton. Fulford, excuse me. I'm off tonight. Forgive me. I need a hamburger, a drink, whatever. Could you say something?
Well, I also appreciate y'all letting me be on the show. Enjoy being here, being part of the discussion.
Thank you. Alan?
I'd have to agree that it's a great place to be, that where people with such different mindsets can come together and discuss without any hostilities.
So you emphasize the term discuss without hostilities. Have you encountered that a lot?
A few times, yes. And I'm sure Michael has as well. Actually, he has more than I have.
Yeah. We have actually in front of me an email that was sent to us asking us various questions about the New Covenant Group. And so without me asking what questions that I would like to ask, I would simply like to ask questions that our audience is asking. And if you have a question tonight and you want to ask things concerning the New Covenant Group, simply text it in to 850-572-7441. And you also can simply put it actually on the Ustream chat. Let's go ahead and get into the questions. The first question is, and this actually comes from a pastor of a particular church. It's called Metro Praise, and it's found in Chicago. Wow. Okay, this pastor asked the question, is the New Covenant Group a church? And so I'm going to pitch this question toward Bob first.
Not really. Certainly there's those of us who would consider ourselves part of the body of Christ, and no doubt that as such we find ourselves involved with this as a part of that. But as a group, we're more about seeking out ways of connecting with people, talking about these issues, but not with any interest in drawing any lines with who's involved in those discussions or the kind of points of view that get considered. So no, not in any conventional sense, or not even in an unconventional sense. So I mean, I certainly don't think of it as my church.
That's a good answer. I would agree completely with that. It's not church. Okay, Daryl, what are your thoughts?
Well, I would agree with that statement, that, and I would have to say no. And I guess the main reason being, we're not in the box, the theological box that most of what we consider church is found to be in. And one of the reasons being, we're the way I see it, the New Covenant group is much broader than that. We're not just interested in any particular theological bias, even though that's welcome at the table, because each individual has a voice and has an opinion, and we're interested in getting together and discussing all these things. But it goes much beyond that. Atheists are welcome as much as a theist, and vice versa. So it's more of a conversation. It's an open thing, as opposed to what you find the closeness of most churches.
Honey, what are your thoughts?
Well, not to sound redundant, but I guess I will sound redundant. I think both the gentlemen are actually hitting on the same notes and tones. As a theist, I do believe in that we are all God's created children. At the New Covenant group, we don't have to express that to everybody that shows up. To me, it's something that is personal, but it's also corporate. But even if you don't accept that, we don't push it, but I believe it. Like, for instance, Michael and Alan are here, and we consider them part of the New Covenant group. They may think differently, but I'll say I consider them part of the New Covenant group, and their opinions and their discussion is just as important as anyone else's. And I think that is one of the unique things about the New Covenant group not being a church, because church kind of puts a governor on, the ability to ask questions, especially with women, and let's be honest, those that disagree with them, your questions are squelched. And we don't do that here. So that's one of the big separations that we have between us and church.
A lot of churches are saying welcome to atheists. And I'm simply saying that the New Covenant group isn't a church, because I think that what the New Covenant group is attempting to do is to leave theism and atheism alike and become a group of people who can intelligently talk about theistic issues and atheistic issues objectively by, in a sense, putting it on the shelf simply to discuss the matter.
Exactly.
And I think this is a group where atheists have just as much of a voice as the theists do.
Right.
It's a conversation. It's not one person ruling over another. It's not a system by which you have dogmatics, etc. And so, in my opinion, I think we're going in that direction, or attempting to do so. Michael, what are your thoughts?
I don't think the New Covenant group could be considered a church. The closest I'd come to would be the classical Greek forums, where people would come in and have debates and discuss topics. Everybody in the group was allowed to talk and voice their opinion, and I think that would be the closest comparison you could draw.
That's good. Alan?
I'm everything's already been said, in my opinion.
It's hard to go last.
Yes.
with
I
this
want to
bunch.
ask you a personal question. Why are you so nice? I mean, every time that I talk with you, you have this overwhelming presence of kindness, and you're just so nice. And most people don't know you, and I just want to emphasize that because you are. I mean, and you're an atheist. And the reason that I say that, it's because most of my life, I thought that all atheists were demonic. And I've had to change my mind because I look at atheists as wonderful people, you know. And so I've had quite the transition in my life, and this is wonderful for me. And my wife and I, we grew up in basically the same pair of boots in a sense, and our lives have radically changed. And so we don't look at atheists and theists as being different. We just look at everyone as being human beings. And you're one of those kind human beings. And so my question is, why are you so kind?
Because I made a choice a long time ago to act how I want to act instead of it being influenced by other people. Like, the terms eye for an eye, being vindictive or anything like that. It's when you allow other people to, it's like, oh, this person is doing this, so why don't I do this? I chose to pull my personality away from that so I can act and treat people how I want to be treated, so that the compassion, the nice side that I show people, and the I keep forgetting words.
Okay.
In the hopes that they'll treat me in the same way.
Right. That's
Well,
good.
I noticed you didn't say that Michael's really, really nice, and he's an atheist.
Well, he is nice, but I was getting around to that. I don't
Yeah, I'm
want
sure
to
you were.
butter him up. Okay, let's move on to the next question. I actually wanted our producer, Joey Livingston, to give us his input on is the New Covenant Group a church, but he's in the back waving his hand and trying to take care of some problems. So let's move on to the second question. The question is, does your group have a statement of faith? And I thought that Bob would probably be the best to react to this, a statement of faith. What are your thoughts on this, Bob?
I don't understand how any organization can have a statement of faith, because organizations don't believe anything. People do. I created a statement of faith for myself, and it's really something that's kind of in flux. But I've never seen anything come out of the New Covenant Group that was construed as a statement of faith. So no. And in fact, as a person who has a show where I share things that I do personally believe, I've never at any time encountered anything that has ever asked me what I believe, or that has told me, well, I can't say that or whatever. Been totally free to be who I am, what I think, what I believe, and to share that, and to be in dialogue with other people who may think absolutely differently. So no, it's a crazy thing.
Honey, what did you feel like years ago when we were involved in church, when we had a statement of faith? What did that make you feel like?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I really didn't read every jot and tittle of the statement of faith. That didn't really govern me personally. After, we left different churches that we weren't, in charge of or whatever, I would read them and I would say, oh my goodness, I was involved in something like this. And now it seems like when I go to different websites and I research for guests and I go to churches' websites and I read their statements of faith, I am now appalled by them. They're very exclusionary. They're very much into human sacrifice. very much into, well, that says it all. If you're not a believer, then you don't really have a voice. You don't have a dog in the show, and it's embarrassing now to say that I've been a part of an organization that has had these crazy statements of faith, and that's the way I believe.
One of the things that I enjoy about the New Covenant Group is we have, for instance, Greg Bray. He was going to be here on the show, but at the last minute he had to pull out. But we have been working on a mission statement. And our mission statement is being written by theist and atheist alike. In other words, this is a place where you can be extremely objective. And if you write something, you can actually say, wow, that doesn't really define us, so let's erase that and we can move on. Here at the New Covenant Group, we don't mind erasing the lines in between atheism and theism. So we can simply look at each other as simply human beings. And to me, that's amazing about this New Covenant Group. And so my question to you, Michael, since you're an atheist, I would assume that you don't have a statement of faith. Is that correct?
I have a statement of faith for myself, which is that people are generally good.
Okay.
And I think that if you base your interactions with people on the expectation that people are generally good, in other words, if you go somewhere, Penn Jillette has a good example. If you're in a rush, it's an emergency, if you go to the first person you see and you give them the keys to your car, tell them to take it to the spot, they will. I think most people are like that. There are bad people in the world who will take advantage of a situation, but for the most part, if something bad happens, you can rely on people to be there.
If you could state something, Michael, that would really improve our mission statement, and right now you haven't read what we've put together, and it's certainly in the rough, what would you put in the mission statement of the New Covenant Group?
As a mission statement, to come together from different points of view to try to find the best solution for everyone, I guess would be the closest I could come. I'm not good for short speeches like that.
I understand. Daryl, jump in. What are your thoughts on a statement of faith, and what would your ideas be concerning a mission statement? What are we about?
Well, let me see if I can collect my thoughts, make a couple of statements. Rhonda said something earlier that I think is applicable here, and I liked what she said. It had to do with the New Covenant being both personal and corporate, and there's already been several answers given as far as any kind of statement of faith as a corporate group. There would be no statement of faith that I know anything about. But as individuals, different ones may have their own statement of faith, as has been brought out by Michael. And I want to say this to you, Michael. I really enjoyed what you said, your statement, and that impresses me that you would be so upbeat about people, because I would kind of view you as one who has probably suffered some abuse, mainly from theists. And to still look at people as basically good, to me that's commendable, and I want to commend you for that. But as far as a mission statement, I think we are just wanting to see people come together, and I think it was Michael that also made reference to this, just find solutions to all of our problems. Let's work things out, let's work together, and with the goal of making this world a better place for everyone, not just for some, not just for those that agree with us or that we agree with, but for all.
Thank you.
I think Daryl hit on something too, because we all have, whether atheist, theist, we're in between, maybe not any of that. We all have common problems. We are all at least human, and so humans, suffer common problems, and not to want to come together and help the human condition, would be a horrible thing. And so it's for the betterment. And that's why sometimes people think that if they call you a secular humanist, that they're really dogging you and cussing you out, basically. But that's one of the highest compliments I think someone could be attributed to.
There was a question asked during Bob's show earlier, and it was, what would be the best translation on the market? And I didn't get to answer everything. I didn't get to an opportunity to go A to Z with what I wanted to say on this show. I wanted to make this statement on this particular show, and it has to do with this idea of statement of faith. Because I think that most people perceive a statement of faith to be what a person believes to be true or whatever. When it comes to the Bible, I think that we would be much better off not having so much a text to read, but actually people who know how to look at the text and actually place a bit of commentary there so people can understand how people perceive the text, that is, or how people wrote the text. For instance, it would be better to listen to Bob Graves concerning the Greek text than it would be for an English-only reader to read a text itself, that is, in English. And I was trying to make that point earlier, and I failed to do so in his show. But I wanted to say that that's the impressive thing that I think that Bob's show does nuance. It says, listen, the text that we do have, that is all of these English texts, they are extremely failed in many ways. And you're not going to find that the Greek is something that we can satisfy word for word. And sometimes it takes a long conversation just to get the point over. And Bob is one of these linguists who is more than patient and willing simply to discuss the text from various points of view. He's multi-axial. He's not willing to say, I commit to this and that's it. No, he's going to look at it from many different angles. And it may seem like he's talking in contradiction. Sometimes he's not. He's simply saying, if you take this approach, this is what you're going to see. If you take another approach, that's what you're going to see. Bob, can you speak to that?
Well, the text itself is something that we are interacting with. And when we're having this discussion that we're having now, if I respond to you in a way that signals to you in some way that I didn't quite clearly understand you, this gives you the opportunity to respond again and clarify something that you feel may not have come across. Whenever you're reading a text, there is no way for the text to kind of respond to you based on how you're responding to the text.
Good point.
And that aspect of communication is very different. And some people never learn how to read a text where they are conscious of the fact that that dynamic is missing. And I think that a good expositor of the biblical text is a person who's trying to get into the mood, the moment of expression that is in the text, and seeking to share that with others, and then responding to the way they respond in a way that can make up for what seems to be missing there. Now, of course, that process assumes that the person doing that has actually connected with the text, and that's not an easy thing to do, and it's not a safe assumption to just go with either. But dealing with the text is not the same thing as dealing with a live conversation. So I think there's a lot of benefit when we're trying to read a text that comes from a dead language in another culture to, kind of go back and forth with that with somebody who has put in some time to struggle with the language, struggle with the culture, and struggle with what's actually being communicated here.
So many times I find myself talking with people who are attempting to say they know the text, what it says, and when you compare it to what these source language documents say, it's not even compatible at all. And so what would you advise people to do? I'm talking about lay people. Would you advise them to listen to more expositors or to simply just keep reading their English Bibles?
I think they should listen to a variety of opinions, and before they dismiss any of those opinions, try to understand why it might be that the person is of that particular opinion. Sometimes people have an agenda that they're trying to really push, and other times people have a real insight that they're able to share. But the one advice that I often give to people who are, merely English speaking, English reading, is that, in my opinion, the biblical text is usually translated in a way that is full of overly dramatic, overly hyperbolic language. And so if you can try to find a way that what is being said might sound more natural, the kind of thing somebody would really say, that doesn't have as much drama in it and doesn't have as much hyperbole in it, chances are, even as an English reader, you're going to do pretty well understanding the text. And also recognizing that you're not ever going to guarantee that you can hit it, nor do you need to. So that's the advice I usually give to just an English reader.
Let me pose this question to you, Bob, before we move to Daryl. And it could be a show in and of itself. What things would you disagree with in regards to what people call the fundamentals of evangelical faith?
Well, I would first of all object to the idea that there are even fundamentals. There are things that are said. We have, to me, the faith is more based upon the person of Jesus, and I understand God to be best defined in terms of His character rather than His, than the autopsy of His nature. So although there may be certain fundamentals that we might want to see as being strongly thematic, I would want to hold on to those things loosely and be willing to move away from them and move more towards the way we get to know anybody in a relationship, where we are open to their constantly surprising us as to who they are instead of who we think they are. But the fundamentals of the faith, it's been a while since I've even rehearsed in my mind exactly what the fundamentals would claim they are, but the virgin birth, the substitutionary death, I find most of those to be, personally, overly stated, more of a projection upon God of a community that wants to be vindicated against people who don't believe like we do, and it perceives these fundamentals of the faith in a manner that really tries to draw the line, maintain the loyalties. And so, I don't think much in terms of fundamentals myself. Certainly there are foundational themes and themes that reoccur and that seem to be pretty strong, but that's really an experience of coherent, ongoing observation.
Daryl, what are your thoughts on this particular question? What would you disagree with in regards to what people call the fundamentals of evangelical faith?
Well, first of all, I'd say kind of along the lines of what Bob has stated as far as the fundamental goes. I don't think much in those terms anymore, but what comes to mind when I try to think of the fundamentals of the faith, I would have to say, for the most part, I reject, I disagree with. The first term that comes to mind is exclusionary. You always have, that's always a factor. It's only certain few that get it, or that do the right thing, or, but it demonstrates the character of God as one who shows favoritism, one above another, and I no longer agree with that notion. And when it comes to things like a substitutionary death, I see that as unnecessary from a God who is defined as love. In the fact that love keeps no record of wrongs, there would be no need to forgive and to have to, for a person, a human being, to have to do something to get this God to forgive. I can't agree with those kind of ideas, and I'll just throw one more thing in. I know I could, if you had a list of the fundamentals, and I could check the ones that I do agree with or don't, be more specific. But one more that seems to be very fundamental would be the notion of hell, that there actually is a place that this torture is going on, and it goes on through eternity, and there's no way I could agree with that. So that's just some of the thoughts that come to my mind, in a moment such as this.
Dr. Jones, could
Yes.
I add just something more here?
Yes.
The one thing that I find so problematic about the fundamentals of the faith is we tend to think of real faith as something spiritual, but all of the fundamentals of the faith are really a very material kind of thing. The belief in the deity of Christ. Here we're trying to outline what God is, and although I have no problem believing that Jesus is God, I don't think I even know what it means for him to be God. I don't know, and I can't nail that down. And to me, it's more important to relate to him than to understand his genus species, and so why this focus on, how I categorize his essence, why don't I just relate to him, and other aspects, whether it be the virgin birth or the inerrancy of Scripture, these are things that are trying to nail down the objective face of things that we deal with in faith. And to me, that's so shallow. That's just the facade. Even if there's something about them that is valid, it's still just the facade. And it's fundamental, the mindset of fundamentalism is, to me, an extreme shallowness and a commitment to really, and almost like Monk the detective, being more hung up about the way you arranged the words than whether or not there's any real meaning or significance in one's life. And so it just strikes me as being a totally the wrong focus.
This particular pastor, and I don't want to belittle the pastor at all, and I don't mean any sarcasm towards his question, but it does catch me off guard a little bit when people ask questions like this. And Bob, once again, I want you to feel this question that I'm going to go to Michael. Is salvation only by faith alone in Jesus Christ?
Depending on what you mean by those words, I'd have to say this. First of all, I believe the message of Jesus is that we are safe. I think he came to teach us that God is not having issues with us the way that religious people want us to think. This is not to say that there aren't any issues or any dangers, but that these are not, God is not the obstacle or the challenge here. And of course, the fact that we are safe with God has a lot to do with who God is, and so that we couldn't be safe with God. God weren't the one open to that being our the nature of our situation with him. So I suppose, there's a sense in which you can't be safe with God without God, but there's this presupposition behind this that, oh, wait a minute, God has got these issues with you, and you're in deep, deep, deep trouble, and we gotta solve this problem, and oh, hey, we got a solution for you. That is an approach that I find basically exclusionary, and that I think really misinterprets the entire purpose and message of Jesus.
Michael, here's a question for you. What are your thoughts on the inerrancy of the Bible? That is, the 66 books of the Bible, the Trinity, the Incarnation, the virgin birth, the second coming of Jesus, the final judgment of Jesus, the lake of fire, and unbelievers. Where will they go? What are your thoughts, Michael?
Well, that's a lot.
That was wonderful. Let's do that again. You want me to ask the question again? That was beautiful.
I think I got the high points. High points. Well, to start with, when it comes to the inerrancy of Scripture, for myself, having read the Bible, and I'm trying to go back and read it again, there leaps out to me several things, and this comes up from mistranslations, from the different texts that were around at the time. We know that the oldest documents that we have for Mark had to have been around the 70th or 75 CE, at least 40 years after the events of the crucifixion were supposed to have taken place. We know as well that we have documents that were attributed to Mark that were supposed to be the same that are different. So there were variations in the script then. We're always uncovering new versions of old documents, older stories of Jesus. From the 4th century, there was a recent one about him being some kind of being able to transform. But with the final copy that we have today, the final version we have today, you can read through this collection of documents and see this doesn't match up. This isn't correct. And if you, like you mentioned before, if you go back to the source material, the translations we have are not accurate, or they're not as accurate. And this is for other things as well. There's a recent reissue of Night, the story of a Holocaust survivor. That was redone because the fellow had learned English and was better able to find words in English that correlated to what he'd originally written. And that's a living language, not a dead language. So there's always going to be problems with translations. When it comes to the return of Jesus, for me, reading the New Testament, that was supposed to have already happened. As far as I'm aware, the generation has already passed, and Jesus has not returned. And it's one thing I do want to say, and it's to me it says something about the Christian culture, is whenever you have a prediction about the end of the world, about the apocalypse, about the end of all things, and it's tied to the second coming, it's never, oh good, it didn't happen. It's always, you have names like the Great Disappointment. You have people who have gone into debt or have made some action that they later regret because they were hoping everybody else was going to die. That always has sat uncomfortably with me. As for what happens after we die, I don't know. I suspect, based off the evidence that we have, with how our brains work, with how our thoughts form, with how our emotions form, that we end. Whatever makes us ends with our body. Now, maybe there's some kind of form of collection of essence that continues after that we can't, for some reason, see at all, but that's no longer us. What makes us is how our brain works, how damage we do to ourselves, beneficence we do to ourselves, the amount of caffeine we may intake daily. All these things are what makes us, and a little bit of chemistry in the brain makes us a different person. So if we die, and if something does continue after that chemistry is no longer there, and that shaping, if you want to think, if there is an essence, if you want to think of this essence as some kind of water, maybe. The water is poured into the human vessel and takes on the shape of the human vessel. Once that human vessel is gone, the person is no longer there. Now, if you want to go into eternal punishment, if you want to talk about eternally punishing something for a finite crime, and this finite crime can be simply, I can't believe this even if I wanted to. That doesn't seem fair at all. But then again, and I'm really going out on a limb here, I'm not a dualist myself, but this essence that no longer has the characteristics of that person, if this essence is now going to be punished for all eternity. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. So,
Good stuff,
did
Mike.
I take up enough time to where I don't have to address the other
No,
parts?
you're doing well. I mean, this is about the conversation. You know, one of the things that I love about this New Covenant group, and I have to express this at this particular time, we don't need lots of evangelists. You know, in the church, that is the church that I came out of, and my wife and I did, we had to have these people who could hold a pep rally. And the thing that I love about the New Covenant group, it doesn't just use people who can talk, who can hype people. It has people who can just sit there and talk and do it without yelling, screaming, preaching, those kind of things. And so I appreciated your comment. Honey, I want to talk to you about this inerrancy of the Bible. What are your thoughts? I want you to tell me in your words, your own words, what you think about this inerrancy thing, because it does affect how women are acting today. What are your thoughts?
Well, I was going to jump in if no one mentioned it, but I believe Bob brought it up as one of the fundamentals of the, evangelical type movements. It's a biggie. To me, it's one of the worst, because everything else hinges on that. And so when you read a statement of faith and it says we believe in the inerrancy of the Word of God, it's right up front. And right away, I just sink, because I know that they are going to discard women, to minister or whatever they want to do in that particular church or body. And I know how they're going to be treated. I know how they'll take that upon themselves and take it in their home and possibly, live out their life that way. And so the inerrancy of the Word of God is a biggie, because it does alienate women really from God. Because in the Bible, we all know that women weren't even counted. Women were not given privileges that the men were. And it was a terrible thing. And I believe that happened. I really do. I don't believe God had anything to do with it. I think it was just hard-headed men thinking that they were better, than the female. And I think women should rise up and say, we've had enough of this. We want to let everybody know that these are not edicts given by God against women. Jesus Christ was very much for women. Women were instrumental in the New Testament.
But one of the things that you said that really sticks in my mind, and I don't think that most people are aware of this, but when they said that, for instance, if we say, Jesus fed the 5,000, it's a very famous passage, but based upon the culture, they would only count the men. They would not count the women. And so it wasn't that women were not counted, that is, in decision making, but normally when you would say how many people were there, in a very crude way, women were simply just not even counted as being there. I mean, it's that sick, and this is very, very tragic. So I this next question is directed toward Alan. So I need the camera on Alan. Okay, I'm going to ask you this question. Okay, I want you to listen to me, Alan.
Oh boy.
The question is, what are your thoughts on the final judgment of Jesus Christ and the eternal lake of fire? I want to know what you think about all of that.
I am not exactly sure. Believe it or
Okay.
not. when it comes to certain areas such as this, the biblical, I am not exactly up to speed on it.
Okay, I appreciate your honesty there, and I loved simply watching and looking at your face when you heard the term this judgment, because also a part of this, and I was going to ask this also to you, but I'm taking up a little bit of time here. I want to get finished with all these questions. You know, what are your thoughts on the judgment seat of Christ, the great white throne judgment, and all this? Let me just ask you a simple question. What do you think about people who are into judgmentalism?
As for judging others,
Right.
Except for the people who are hired to do it, I think they should stick their nose in their own business instead of others.
That's good. That's good. Bob, what are your thoughts on this great white throne and judgment
Well,
seat of Christ and the final judgment and the eternal lake of fire? You're
Yeah.
smiling.
No, it's hard to take some of that seriously. The text says, it is appointed unto man once to die, and after this, the judgment. If I was to believe that there was any credibility to the story as it's traditionally spun, I would want you to know that after I die and when that judgment occurs, I would give God every opportunity to explain himself so that he gets judged fairly. So, I can't. First of all, this word judgment strikes me as more having to do in the communication of a sense of diagnosis or as a sense of forming an opinion. And you know what? I do think that if God understands something about me that I don't, it would be very helpful for me to know what that might be and something for me to work with and consider. So I can imagine that would be useful. But something that was said earlier that I totally agree with is that to me, our sense of identity, as I understand it, can't even be wrapped up in our biological experience of the person we know ourselves to be. And the idea that we're going to was it Michael who mentioned this? That we would be punished forever for in an essence of something we never were purely in that form is crazy. I can see that God would have some redemptive or productive developmental purpose in some sort of approach to the things that we have done, but for God to be vindictive and punitive is crazy. And I think a good way of talking about that would be if I was dealing with a child who is doing something that isn't really good to do and trying to explain to them what's going on, I can't imagine thinking myself proper in getting angry and punitive with this child because they're not getting it and feeling like, well, I'm going to punish them because I'm trying to teach them this thing they don't know. I just can't picture the divine being properly mature and then having this vindictive approach where, okay, that's it. I'm tired of all this crap. So here you go, into the lake, and you're just going to stay there forever and ever, and you're going to just, be in torment forever. What purpose does this cruelty show us? And I don't understand why people don't look at that and say, this God has some problems. He's got some issues, And so I find the notion to be more what man wants, to believe God is going to do, to vindicate us against all of them. And it's an interesting illusion, and it's a fantasy. But I think it's a very unkind and unloving fantasy.
This question comes from another person, Bob, and I want you to address this particular question before we move on. Since we were all born in sin, that is, with a sin nature, what is the age of accountability?
Well, I can't buy into the assumption that the question begins with. I don't believe in a sin nature, and to be honest with you, although there is some, I believe, anthropomorphic nonsense in the text, there is also some anthropomorphic nonsense in the interpretation of the text. When I look at the text, I don't see the text anywhere trying to teach that we have a sinful nature. I don't see it there in the text, and this is an abusive concept. So the age of accountability is, you are accountable at any age for anything you can appreciate in terms of the predictable and understandable outcomes of the choices, actions, and values you embrace. And you're accountable to them to the degree you're capable of appreciating them. And I think that as you grow as a child, or even as an adult, that changes. I think I'm 61. The things I'm now capable of appreciating as the outcome of my choices, I think I'm a far better person at 61 than I was at, say, 31. And but the difference in many ways is the way I've grown. How accountable could I be? Well, I think I need to develop. So even accountability for the purposes of ongoing development is useful, but if we're talking about accountability so that I know where I can categorize and label a person and therefore dismiss them with that, I'm not so sure I even like that concept of accountability other than for the purposes of personal development.
Daryl, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I like to think about the character of God and what would be consistent with that. If you factor in something that we've already talked about, and that would be the supposed inerrancy of the Bible, and we try to take the aspects of judgment and eternal torture, and as Bob and Michael have both been referring to, being punished infinitely for something finite, it makes no sense at all in the first place. But when you add to the dilemma here that within the character of God, supposedly, you can look, for example, at the fruit of the Spirit, that which the character of God is produced in a person's life. You look at love, joy, peace, long-suffering, goodness, gentleness, faith. You don't find anger. You don't find resentment. You don't find vindication. And so I find a real problem in reconciling these two ideas, these two issues. And then on top of that, according to the writings of Paul, we are being transformed into his image. And so I've got to determine whether I'm to be long-suffering, gentle, kind, and have this sort of character, or do I go with this angry, vindictive one that wants to take my children, and when they do something out of line, then I need to consider some kind of eternal punishment? That's just a little bit too inconsistent for me.
I think the age of accountability is just one of those urban legends that people made up to, make themselves feel better if their child died, or if the child didn't get saved, or it's just another fantasy of the church.
I agree completely. Yeah. Michael, when it comes to the New Covenant group, I want you to tell me why you are here.
I like to talk, and you let me talk.
At least he's honest.
Okay. To be a little more serious, I enjoy having discussions with people. For the longest time, I've done them online. I've done them with people in person where we weren't really having a discussion. We weren't really having any sort of interplay. And here I can. And I learn, and some people have told me that they learn from me, which I find amazing. And I'm sorry they feel that way, but it makes me feel good, and I appreciate hearing that. And that's really, that's why I'm here. I enjoy it. I did want to say something about, because I was Catholic, about the idea of original sin, being born into sin. One of the ways it was impressed into me was that all that is good flows from God. All that is evil comes from us. Now, you have the idea of Lucifer as loose on earth, which wasn't original church teachings. But that was the way it was impressed onto me, is that anything bad I do, that's me. But anything good I do, that's God. How destructive is that idea? Nothing you do that is good is through your own effort. All that is bad is what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I concur with what you're suggesting. Oftentimes what we do is we find ourselves in these conundrums and we don't know how to get out. And I think the usefulness of this kind of movement, namely the New Covenant group, is to get people to rethink, namely their positions. And so I do appreciate you making the statement that you come here because you do have a voice. And one of the things that I like about the New Covenant group, it gives a voice to those people who are different than you are, and it's the way that we can actually grow together. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I certainly concur with that. I was going to kind of go in a teeny bit different direction and give Michael a chance. I don't want to say redeem yourself from last week, but I do want the audience to know when we had Fletcher and Tina on, and this is going to sound really bad, and people might really think I'm horrible, and maybe so, but whenever you mentioned to Tina about, have you ever considered about the insane asylum, it was like in perfect timing, but do you have any regrets for saying that? I know you apologized. You didn't want to hurt her feelings, and we really appreciate that. But I want you to explain what went on.
Well, when she said that she's hearing voices that she says is God, and I have to look at it from my perspective, which is that she's saying that she's hearing voices. The reason why I asked her and why I kind of pressed her into, if God tells you to kill a child, would you kill a child? She said yes. Now, she also says that her God would not do that. When someone is telling me that they hear voices regularly, that they hold a conversation with voices, I would be concerned. I know that if I heard voices, I would definitely go to a hospital, because we can see if there's something wrong with a person and they're hearing voices. If it's the voice of God, there should not be any difference in brain chemistry. There should be no medicine that would be able to block it. There should be no therapy that would circumvent it. It would be the voice of God. If for me, as a personal responsibility, so that because one of my greatest fears personally is that I do harm to another person, unintentionally at least, but to do harm to another person. And if I were to suspect that something with me, Alan mentioned there's a parasite called Toxoplasma gondii, which makes you more violent. But, I don't drink to excess or anything like that. If there was something that I would... I'm sorry.
There is a God.
But if there was...
He apologized. He repented, brother, of his sins.
But if there was something that I thought, or that could be a sign of something that could cause me to do violence to another person, I would want to make sure that that is not a threat, that that is not a possibility, that it's not an indication that there's something wrong with me, or anything that would, an end result could be that I could be carrying out something that in a normal state like I am now, well, normal, relative, but that I would find abhorrent. And I'm not going to list anything, but that I would find abhorrent, I would want to prevent that while I know that I can do something to it. And that's kind of what I was wanting to say is if you're hearing voices, have you considered maybe there's something wrong? And you should just check. Because like I said, if it is the voice of God, if it is God speaking to you, there's nothing that we could do that would prevent you from being able to continue this connection. And because a more likely scenario is there's something wrong, which is causing you to hear voices, I would say it would be a more responsible, both for yourself and for anybody you might be around, to go to a hospital, get yourself examined, make sure there's nothing that could cause you problems down the line.
Okay, I just, I don't want to say I was teasing him about it, but, I asked him about it, and I knew that he wanted to make her comfortable, and, we did lead her down a trail, would you, and there's a community called Bellevue, 5 miles from here, if God told you to go to Bellevue and kill this house full of people, would you do it? And she said, yes, I would. And that is scary. And as much as I believe in God, if he told me right now to get up and go strangle Alan, I just wouldn't do it. I mean,
I appreciate that.
Don't you think, though, that a person who would sense that God is telling him to kill someone would also be a person who would not sense that they should go to a hospital and get help?
Exactly.
The fact that they're in that position to think that they could hear such a voice as that, they're going to be far more under the sense of a compelling obedience.
One thing she said, in fact, was that she recognized her own internal morality. She understood what is moral. They both, Fletcher did as well. But whatever God says trumps that.
Yes.
That's a very common belief among many theists, is that somehow God is exempt from this moral law.
Right.
Yeah.
He's a get out of jail free card, sort of,
And I've heard apologists say that, well, that innate moral sense, that comes from God. But if it comes from God and he's ordering you to circumvent that sense,
Well, I mean, you sort of got it backwards because to God that is moral, because they say it's moral and just for God to, exact his wrath on people that are in disobedience. So that is God's morality according to some people.
Yeah, which to me is ultimately saying that morality is relative. You may, I get into these debates often where you have to have an objective morality. And I am of the opinion you can come to some objective moral conclusions, not in all situations, but you can, without a God. But when you say that, well, my objective morality is God, when you get to that point, there's still a relative morality, because now you've just moved a step back. Now your morality is relative on God's will. And if the only documents we have that pertain to his will show that to be subjective to how he's feeling that particular day.
Now, the conversation the other night was going in a particular direction, and one of the things that I was really impressed with, and I think, honey, you're nuancing this, we are getting very close to these atheists who are coming around. We love them, they love us. And what's happening with the New Covenant group, we have atheists and theists alike coming together, and we love each other, and we're developing, friendships. And this is powerful. But one of the things that I can testify about last Sunday night was the majority of the atheists that I talked to after the show, they really didn't want to push their atheism on these two individuals. They were filled full of compassion, wanting to see these two individuals get some intervention, some help, and things of that nature. That really impressed me. That was wonderful. And so the question would be, why are all of these atheists so willing to help people, and theists are not? And could you tackle that subject, Joey?
First, you have to explain why I've transformed from Alan.
I think Alan got scared when I said I was going to strangle him, and he left the stage.
That's what I was wanting you to admit.
That's why he put on a suit of armor.
You had a moment where, Michael had to bear himself. Now I want you to talk about why you made the statement about Alan.
I'm sorry.
And strangling him.
I'm sorry.
Okay. The second thing I want to say is that atheists don't have to talk about atheism. Atheism is contagious. It seeps from the pores of the skin. If
I
one
shower
sneezes,
regularly. What are you saying?
or if there are open sores in the body, it spreads in various ways. So
I think he's making
it's
that
much
point.
easier for
I
an
think
atheist
so
to-
too, Daryl.
Well, of course, antibiotics help.
Ointment is a very good preventative. So the question was, why are atheists more helpful than theists are?
No,
No,
that's
no,
not
no,
the
no.
question.
No, I wouldn't say that.
The question
And
is,
I wouldn't say that
I
either.
mean, here
No.
we
I
have
wouldn't
two
say that either.
theists presenting. I mean, they're not presenting something that's far-fetched.
Yeah.
That is in the context of fundamentalism. They are presenting something that they're taught day in and day out. And they are doing a wonderful job at being honest
Right.
with their particular worldview. And so my question is, why are atheists reacting not, let's try to prove to them that there is no God? They didn't even go after that.
Mhm.
Atheists were simply concerned about them, wanting to help them. Why is that help
I see.
happening, in your opinion?
I see. I think there's a lie that exists in this world. It's a big one, and it's buried so deep in the mind of most theists, and that is that you have to disconnect from your human self in order to learn to love.
Yeah.
And Michael said it well, or he spoke to a part of that, which is that theists are taught that everything that they do that comes from them is bad, or most theists are. But Christians certainly are, almost on every level, taught that most of the things that come from them is bad, and if they do anything good, that it's not to their credit, it is to God's credit. And this is just one very dirty teaching that compels the psyche to try and separate itself from itself, that we can no longer be ourself, and we must become something different in order to stand any chance of redemption. And I think that that's a huge lie. And I didn't always believe that. I used to buy into it, and one thing I found is that when I found permission to throw that away and get to know myself again, to remember who I was before I believed that, to find the child that I was once and start growing up from there again. I found a warmth, I found a tenderness that I had never experienced before, or at least not on that level. I can't say that I became some cold-hearted biatch or anything, but I didn't experience on that level, and I found myself more able to connect with people, and to make friends with anyone, because now that means if that's a lie, and I have in getting in touch with my humanity is the thing that empowers me more to love, then that means that everybody has that, because we're all human beings, and I think that atheists probably understand that much quicker, because they typically don't buy into that in the first place unless they came out of religion, and most of the atheists that are here with us today are humanists, so which is a group of people that believes in helping other human beings for the sake of just being human. So
That's good. I'm having a difficult time with my throat. It's going to be difficult for me to continue talking, but I wanted to get your input on what is the New Covenant Group, because it was the first question.
All right. Well, before we do that, I want to contemplate the conundrum of why this mic is so low when the person who was just sitting here is twice my height. I don't understand. So we're going to readjust this so that it's a...
Yeah, we've got you closer to the cameras.
Was he hunching over when he was talking into it? Okay. All right. That makes... Because my back is already hurting. Does your back hurt, Alan? Okay. All right. That's what I thought.
Well, we had him further away from the camera, so he looked shorter, and now you're closer to the camera, so you look taller.
Okay, so I just spent half the show trying to recreate with the help of my crew, who did a fantastic job of helping me to recreate our audio system. So I'm completely frazzled. The question was, what is the New Covenant Group? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay, what is the New Covenant Group? I've been asked that question a lot since, especially since we started connecting with atheists, which is ironic because, what we were before we connected to atheists is, if we're honest, different than what it was after we connected with atheists. Yeah. And, what some people might see as inconsistency in that, we keep changing, I see as our best quality. What we were 15 years ago is quite different than what we are now. 15, 20 years ago, we were a small organization in Texas. Daryl was a part of that group. Struggling to grow from one religious place to a higher religious place, from one theology to another theology. We were constantly changing, and that's thanks to you, Dr. Jones. And looking back, what I saw, in the middle of it, what I thought we were was, or at one time, what I thought we were was a group of people trying to learn everything about the Bible. Trying to know everything about God. Paul, he knew the full circle of the gospel. He understood all of it. We wanted to know everything that he knew. What I realized looking back is that you were taking the time to teach us what we believed, and that was all you were doing. You weren't trying to make us better Christians. Well, in a sense you were, but you were trying to teach us what we believed. And I say that to people a lot because it's such a confusing statement. Well, I know what I believe. Well, do you really? How many Southern Baptists really understand what they believe? Or what their organization believes? How many reformers really understand what it is what they believe? How many people really understand what they're saying when they say that the Bible is infallible and that it has no mistakes in it and everything in it is good and true? And that's what you were teaching us. I remember you doing this teaching. Daryl may remember this, where you showed us this passage in the Bible where it was telling us that in God's eyes we were dogs, and that we needed to basically lick his feet if we wanted to be worthy. And I remember a lot of people in that, in that sanctuary say, "Amen." Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of them really thought that that's okay. Well, if the Bible says it, it must be true. I sometimes I think I really seem like well, I'm not going to get into that, but what I want to say is that it must have taken a lot of guts to do what you did. I don't know that I could have stood up there and taught people that the Bible was teaching us in this passage that in God's eyes we were dogs. And it was an Old Testament passage. I don't remember what it was. You may. but and that we needed to lick his feet to be worthy, and to hear people say amen, and knowing now that you didn't believe it at all, but you did believe that the Bible said that. And so you were awfully sneaky, because you brought us to this place where, knowing now what we believed, we couldn't possibly accept it and feel good about it. You know, there's a lot of theists that once you start talking to them about these things, they just cover their ears because they're taught to do that. But you took 15 years to do it for us, and I hope you never do it again, because you'll be dead by the time you rescue 60 people. You know, because a lot of people in that group dropped away before we were done. And so that's what we were back then, but that is not what we are now. We are now a group of people who has been so sickened by you, Dr. Jones, and your teachings of the Bible, that we have rejected it. And you know, we came to a place to where we, at one point, believed that everybody was saved. You know, well, if this is bad, but Jesus is good, then if the Old Testament is bad, but Jesus is good, then God must love everybody, and everybody must be saved. And then we had to ask the question, saved from what? We don't believe in hell anymore, so saved from what? Saved from ourselves. Why? Are we bad? No, you're just children growing up. So saved from what? Turns out there isn't anything to be saved from. There's just a bunch of people growing up. And so we had to dismiss that idea. And, you know, I know that there are people within our organization right now, the New Covenant Group, who are in a healthy place, but it's a tough place because they don't know what to believe anymore. And they want to hold on to something that they can say, this is true and it will never change. And they haven't gotten used to the water that they're in now, that we are moving forward. And there are things that we may embrace now that we may put aside later for something better. And I think that we need to get used to that, because that's who we are now. And it's really who we always were, because we've always changed. We've always moved forward. We just weren't always this unreligious. And so now we've come to a place to where we agree with the atheists. They're not saved, and neither are we. That we're in the same boat. I may think that we came from something conscious and willful that's much larger than ourselves, and Michael Fulford might be wrong, but we sit together and we talk about these things. That was a joke that nobody got.
You might be wrong.
Right. But so now the New Covenant Group is about the discussion and moving forward, and who wants to come with us? Well, where are we going? Well, that's what we're going to talk about. Let's talk about it, and let's keep moving. So that's what the New Covenant Group is. And if that didn't make sense to you, then it's probably my fault.
I remember going through the hell of teaching people their theology, because I felt as if I could manage teaching their theology, they would reject it. I think this is what Jesus came along to do, is to simply defeat fiction with fiction, legend with legend, things of that nature. And I think the only way you can really adequately defeat these maniacal mindsets of theology is simply by introducing people to their own theology. It's like looking in the mirror. At some point, you will walk away from it. And so it was a very difficult task, to say the least. I don't think that you can walk up to the average theist and say, hey, there's no hell. I don't think that you can walk up to the average theist and say, you know, you don't really need to be saved from your sins, etc. You just can't do that. It's unfortunate, but these people are trapped, in a sense, in a box. Bob, can you speak to this?
You know, the paradigm shift for any of us is something that can occasionally happen suddenly, but even the sudden paradigm shift requires a great deal unanticipated preparation ahead of time. And when I read the text, the biblical text, and look at the words of Jesus, there are many times when I see Jesus saying things in a way where I think he's mocking the teaching of the Pharisees. And yet many Christians will read this and saying, oh, see, Jesus is setting the standard here. I mean, an example, when Jesus is saying, oh, if you look at a woman to lust after her, you're committing adultery already in your heart. And he talks about how, if your eye offends you, pluck it out. And if your hand offends you, and he's really talking about masturbation there, then, cut it off. And he's making fun of this absurd notion that the Pharisees and Sadducees have, that they are so pure before God and based on their own standard. And I see it much as that little short story there, The Modest Proposal, where it said, this is the way to solve all the hunger here in England. We can start, eating the poor babies, And there are other places where Jesus is speaking where I see this as mocking. And so he did do that. He tried to confront people with, do you hear what you're saying? Okay, where would that take you? Let's take this down the road and find the ultimate conclusion it leads us to. Can you live with this? Is this something you can work with? And I think that many times this reminds me of when now I took karate and jiu-jitsu and judo, but I did have occasion once to work with somebody who knew Aikido, and this person was amazing. And part of the concept of Aikido is you never resist anybody. If they're pushing or pulling, you go in the direction they're going in. You just simply redirect their energy. And those that get really good at it, they can tie you up in knots and all at your own hand. And I think that there's a sense in which sometimes teaching people who are stuck in fixed beliefs and are loyal to a concept rather than to the reality of life, that sometimes you just kind of have to move them along in the direction they're headed in until they can see exactly where it is they're headed.
That's a good point. Daryl, what are your thoughts? We're coming close to the end of our show, and we want to hear your thoughts.
Well, Joey definitely stirs up some memories, and fortunately for me, I can say along with, I'm reminded of some of the things that Paul used to say about himself. There was he was ashamed of a lot of the things he had done in the past, but I think the reason was he come to realize they weren't really consistent with who he really was. He just hadn't come face to face with himself. And, I look back and I can remember times when things would dawn on me, when realities would come my way. And I don't know how many different people at different times I've actually gone and apologized to. I think I've done this with every one of my children. Just for planting so many ideas in their head and treating them a certain way. I was staying consistent with my theology, with my beliefs, but very inconsistent with the real character that I really am, and that is the character of love, the character that we actually see in Jesus. And it was this learning process, this growing process of change is wonderful. And I think that if anything can be promoted within the New Covenant group, that should be it. We can see that there is a better way. And I think we're discovering that. I think it's not just, even though it's a wonderful thing that theists and atheists are coming together, and it's phenomenal in my estimation, but to actually realize that theists can come out of such hideous ideas and, well, to put it in the terms of the Apostle Paul, it's thing that I can think of. And in his words to the Galatians, who has bewitched you, you know? I think so many have been bewitched, and we really can't see who we are compared to who we are actually presenting ourselves to be.
Before we end, I would like to talk about community for a moment, because I think that our ability to connect with each other is going to enable us to go forward more rapidly. If you're teaching theists and you have to use their theology in order to defeat their theology, that is, to get them to be more reasonable, it's a very slow march forward. But if you can get people to connect and be somewhat rational and get to like one another, I think that we can move forward more rapidly. What are your thoughts, honey?
Well, I mean, I just can only agree with you. According to Joey, you know, we have made a bigger shift since we have become more inclusive. And I don't
Chapter
think
and
we
verse.
were,
Chapter and verse.
I don't think we were actually really exclusive as a mainstream church is today. But, you know, to be honest, I have always not shunned, but, you know, never associated with atheists. I either, you know, didn't take the time to know them, or I didn't encounter them. But since I have, you know, I hate to use, no, I won't say that, because like I have an atheist as I have an atheist as a friend. You know, some people say that about black people. I have a black friend. You know, y'all know what I'm saying. Y'all know what I'm saying. But now I have an atheist as a friend. It's different.
That's okay. You can use that word.
Okay, but because
Careful about the A word.
I have a friend who's an atheist.
I have a friend.
Wow.
That's it. I have
That
a
makes
friend
me
who's an
special.
atheist.
Wow.
What color is
Bob, do you have an atheist a friend who is an atheist?
I mean,
You
it's,
know, I gotta tell you, Greg Bray is to me a friend, precious friend. I never knew him before we started the show, and I've gotten to know him. Now he starts the show because we talk about this tension that we kind of in some ways even play up, where he's the atheist and I'm the theist, and although that hasn't changed, I like Greg. He's an awesome guy, and I consider him a friend. And you know, I don't think in terms of, oh, but he's an atheist and I'm a theist. He's a wonderful fellow, and my life is a richer life because of the wonderful show that he and I have been able to do together. To me, it's a ton of fun with a person who's just a very very valuable and meaningful human being, and I just, you know, to me it's you know, why wouldn't he be my friend? I mean, he's a wonderful
Right.
guy.
right.
Bobby's not here. You don't have to. You don't have to.
Oh,
he's
he's
not
gone?
listening.
Okay.
You know, sometimes it gets awkward when we are coming together, and in time, that just dissipates. It goes away. And so let's talk a little bit more about community. What are your thoughts, Michael, on community?
Well, one of the hardest things for atheists
It's a great
is...
show. It's a great show. Community.
Oh, I've not seen it. I really should watch more TV. But one of the hardest things for atheists is, well, there's two reasons why there's not really an atheist community. One, most people, their community is their religion. And I say there's not really, it's building, but for the longest time, if you were not religious and you let people know, your community was gone. Full stop. And I've known many people who I've talked with. We had, you had Sarah Moorhead on previously, and she spoke to that. If you do not toe the line, you lose everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything worthwhile. Your family, your friends, many other people. Community is one of the most important things for humanity, for people. And in general, there are loners, but you know, for the most part, that's the thing that is most important to us. And I do think that's why many people stay in religion is we're trying, but atheists, the atheists that are out right now tend to be nonconformists, tend to be kind of standoff, or we get used to being by ourselves. And one of the things I'm working, I say I'm working, I'm hardly involved. I'm just there to sit in a chair. But what we're working for is making a community for atheists in our area. Being here, interacting with other people, enjoying conversation, which I think is very important. And I think a healthy community is one that welcomes new ideas, welcomes discussion, lets people in who disagree, believes wrong things, like, say, someone believes that there's a conscious action in the creation of the universe.
And the other person is wrong.
One of them's wrong. But I do think community is very important. And what is community? Well, community is the people you know. They're the friends who are going to be there to help you. It's your neighbor. It's your neighbor down the road. It's the mailman who comes by. Hopefully it should be your elected officials, too. It should be part of your community. And there'll be people who you trust with your family, who you would trust with your car, to trust to watch over your house. The trust, and when I'm saying family, that's the most important thing you could trust to somebody else. And those are all things that should be in a healthy community. And I think that's, I think having a forum like this helps to build that. Because I know as an atheist, I like being around other atheists at times. But I like being able to have discussions with people who there's something to disagree on. And I think that both they're separate, but there can be interchange between those communities. And I think that having that interchange, a healthy interchange, is to the benefit of both.
We have about 2 minutes left. Daryl, what are your thoughts on community? Make it quick, please.
Well, I'd have to say that I pretty much agree with everything Michael just said. I mean, I concur totally. Just one thing I would like to add, kind of like the thing that we talked about with the New Covenant group. It's both personal and collective. And I think we although we may start small and see and have this discussion among just a few people and begin to move toward community in a small sense, we shouldn't be satisfied until we see the whole world as one big community functioning together. And I think the potential is there.
Yes.
It has to start somewhere.
Joey.
Very good.
I want to say two quick things. I want to say to Bob and Daryl, I just wonder if you ever felt like I felt. Michael was just talking about how our postman should be our friend. This person should be our friend, and that person should be our friend. And I was thinking to myself, I remember a day when if I met somebody new like the postman and I really liked him, I dreaded the day of finding out what he believed or him finding out what I believed. Even if we were both Christians, I knew that there was a point in the conversation that we would reach where one of us would not agree with the other person, and that might end our friendship. Did either of you ever have that sinking feeling?
I think I can identify with that. Sure.
Yep.
So I wanted to say that. I'm glad that that's gone. I don't have to worry about that. All I have to worry about is if somebody else doesn't want to be my friend anymore.
Absolutely.
But the second thing I want to say is I made a comment earlier today on Daryl's show, and he didn't read it. Stephen didn't read my comment. But it was about community.
Oh, you made that.
Yeah.
That's good.
We'll talk later. It was about community, and the reason why as religious folk we used to get together was because we felt, some of it was because we felt compelled. The Bible said we should. But now that that's over, why do we gather? And I began to ask the question, which I always do: why did I do these things when I was a kid? And as children, we gather together because we want to, because we are discovering new things all the time, and we're exploring, and celebrating new things together. Dr. Jones made a comment this morning about kids getting together and finding dirt and making mud together. Adults generally would not do that because they've done it, as a kid, been there, done that, and so it's not new anymore. But it was so new and so exciting when we were a kid. And as we discover more and more new things, that's why we get together and we celebrate these new things and we talk about them, and it's fun. That's why I get together with Michael and some of the other guys, and we watch Game of Thrones because we love that show. It's new, it's fun, and what I noted about that was once we stop moving forward, we stop finding new things, and it gets stagnant, and there comes a point sooner or later when we don't want to gather anymore because there's very little to gather about. But friends, when they gather together, they find new things to explore together, even if it's just a conversation, talking about a new joke or something that happened that day that had never happened before. It's always about something that is fresh and interesting. Even if it's the same old thing, it's probably something new and interesting, and or remembering something a long time ago that's gone for so long that it feels new again to remember it. Nostalgia. It's all, I may be going overboard a little bit here just to make a point, but a big part of gathering together is about moving forward and celebrating new things together.
That's good. That's good. Bob, your final thoughts.
Anybody who we don't allow into our community is a person where it is far easier for us to consider them subhuman without our realizing that's exactly what we're doing. Love, care, consideration, and genuine respect of other people is going to happen best when they are people welcome into our community, welcome to be a part of it, and where we seek to be involved as community with each other. I'm hoping that we see that the internet and various things like that technologically turns this into a worldwide community. Hopefully there's more peace that's going to come from that. But to me, community is essential because it allows us to treat each other as dignified, valuable human beings.
That's right.
That's good. That's good. Alan, you're back up.
Yes, I've transformed back from Joey. Something earlier you said about the mission statement.
Right.
And I was thinking about that since you said it. And I actually wrote something down if you'd like to hear it.
I want to hear it. All of us do. I mean, wow, we're
Yes.
all ears. Yes.
Some of us theists, some of us atheists, some of us not so sure. All of us human, each of us unique. To come together as a community of individuals to grow in discussion. Not exactly complete, but
Oh, wow.
Wow.
That is awesome. Yeah, good job. That's impressive. Good for you. Good for you.
Can you read that again? That is powerful. Make sure that you get the audio just right on this, Joey, because this is wonderful. Do
All
it
right.
again.
some of us theists, some of us atheists, some of us not so sure. All of us human, each of us unique. To come together as a community of individuals to grow in discretion.
Wow, that's awesome. This is the powerful thing about community. People coming together, sharing their thoughts, not just their thoughts, but their talents. Behind me we have Vince. He's doing a marvelous job just trying to do this. And Vince, why don't you come up to my microphone and make a statement to the audience, because I think you have something to share with us concerning community. Just get over here, right by.
All right, he can sit here.
Yes, I do.
Well, I think what happened with me today was my painting had to take a different course. And in the discussion about it, I learned something about the New Covenant group. And I see that it's had a lot of it's had a long history. I'm starting to pick up on these little bits. And atheism and theism are the main pillars across which the discussion travels. But there's also 3 or 4. There's always 3. You know what I'm saying? It's never polarized. There's always 3. There's you, there's me, and there's reality. There's atheism, there's deism, and other religions have entirely different positions about the human condition. And if you start from psychology, the problems of being, and then look at those religions. I'm thinking about Hinduism and Taoism and Buddhism. They just have a completely different position. And I see that it's possible. In other words, if we're all to be together on this planet, we have to take them into consideration too.
That's good. Very good.
Thank you.
Way to go, Daniel.
Full-on shot of painting so far?
Go for it, Bob.
I was just wondering if we could have a full-on shot of the painting that Vince has been doing, so we can see at least how this is so far.
Let me get one of the camera guys, if we can take this one right here and pull that camera on. Yeah. Okay, let's see. We've got a camera set up in a strange way tonight. See what you can do, Joey.
Guess we can promise.
You could just take that off the tripod, son, and do that one. That would be wonderful. Or you can float that one. The thing that I love about the New Covenant group, there's a lot of patience here. It's not about hype. It's about taking time for each and every individual. It's about learning how to listen to different kinds of people and just enjoy. You get to ingest it and digest it, in other words. It's good. Okay, let's show this painting. Okay, Rick, why don't you switch? Okay, that is the painting. It's coming together. It's not complete, but it's getting there. That is our son Matthew right there. And below him is actually Greg Bray. He almost looks demonic. What's ironic is the name is his painting. That would be a crew member right there.
Crew member.
And that is Tammy.
Tammy.
Yeah. And I don't know who that rascal is. Okay.
Here's Jack.
Jack.
I'm sneering at everybody.
Joey
There's
is smelling something rotten.
And I'm right underneath.
And then Michael.
Michael right underneath. Wow. This is awesome. Yeah.
One more shot.
Okay, one more shot. Okay.
I wish I could see it.
Oh.
You'll just have to watch
Joey
the video.
sneering.
That's going to be my new Facebook icon right there.
That'll work. Well, honey, why don't you close out the show for us?
Okay. Bob reminded me of something. You know, social media has broadened a lot of people, their, I guess, education into different cultures and people and ways of thinking. And it reminded me that this week we got a phone call from a gentleman from Belgium, Brussels, Belgium. And you talk about encouraging. It was amazing. Are you going to play it? Yeah. We'll let Dr. Jones play it. But he's a third-generation missionary. And he's currently living in Belgium. And he says, I've had a lot of questions for a long time. And I just want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. And without what we're doing, without the videos, without the Ustream, the Facebook, the email, the advertising, people would not be connected. And I just really appreciate the opportunity and the time we live in that we can hear messages like this and people can be affected. All right, he's trying to get it off of his
for 21 days.
Law.
Next message.
Hey Michael, my name is Chris Christensen, and I'm calling you from Brussels, Belgium, where I live. I'm a third-generation missionary, and I've had a lot of questions for a long time, and just listening to you here on the internet, and wanted to thank you for what you're doing and the stand that you're taking to speak the truth. I feel like finally found a home, and love to talk to you, and I'll either email you or try to call you back at a later time. But I just want to encourage you in what you're doing and what you're speaking. Thank you. Bye.
Wow.
Every week we get actually hundreds of emails and text messages just from people who are saying, keep it going. And people are afraid. Atheists know that if they come out of the closet, many of them can lose their jobs. Theists know the same thing. We have a college here that is a Christian college here in town, Pensacola Christian College. Many of the professors have come over here, namely language professors, and have spoken to me. And in fact, one of them came over and we had a conversation in Greek for about 2.5 hours. Nothing but Greek. It was wonderful. He said, I believe everything that you're teaching. And this inclusive idea of God, or the conversation being about atheists and theists alike, this is powerful. But I can't say anything because I will lose my retirement if I do. And so I have two or three more years left, and then I can retire, and then I can become a part of the New Covenant group. And I keep telling people we're going to have to be patient with people. We're going to have to be kind. We're going to have to be gentle and tender because people are scared. This is a new day, but we have to allow enough time for that transition to take place in people's lives. And so I'm so thankful for all the atheists here. I mean, you guys are bringing such a wonderful spirit of honesty and love and a nurturing value to the New Covenant group. And so I hope that everyone here can understand a little bit better what the New Covenant group is about. It's not about just one person or two people, but it's hopefully about all of us becoming one, and becoming one in the most meaningful way. And so thank you so much for being here with us on the show. Love you, honey.
I love you too.
Good night.